What's going on, creators? Yeah, I just want to get on here and bring everybody back to now. Appreciate y'all being here and vibing with me for a bit. Yeah, today I'd like to talk a little bit about the spiritual practice of giving in order to receive and how you can start to apply this more and more so in the present moment so you're not spending your day in states of fear, scarcity, lack, the things that are undesirable, that are unconsciously perpetuating in the moment, which a lot of times the world will actually double down on what they don't want, reinforcing that in consciousness, and actually through their fear of the undesirable, manifest that more and more so into their life and experience. But to start switching those habituated patterns of suffering, giving is the remedy. And so anytime you're faced with a fear, a situation, some drama, any of this type of stuff that's undesirable, and you want to make a change and start to experience more levels of unity and oneness, giving is the first step. It's the first action to be taken in the face of whatever you're experiencing. And that might even just be giving to yourself, which is where it all kind of stems from anyway. And so it's important to be mindful and aware of your thinking in terms of relationship. And everything in creation is relationship. Your body, your relationship, your inner talking, the inner conversation you have regarding your body is one type of relationship. Your finances, that's another type of relationship. Your spouse, it's another relationship. When you realize that everything in creation has this divine correspondence where these inner beliefs and assumptions are being externalized onto the screen of space and being reflected back to you like a big mirror, well, then you can start to look at any of these areas that are a total shit show in the present moment, that are chaotic, dysfunctional, energy draining. All of those are big red flags that you are listening to a inner narrative from your cursed mind. And what I mean by that, not to guilt and shame yourself for having an ego, but it has to do with a persona, this personality where you believe that you're separate from everything going on in creation. Like there's all these separate forces, you're a victim, you're powerless, you're at the whims of whatever some external deity in the sky is wanting for you and whatever. But it's in realizing that everything is connected and everything is reflecting this this kind of impersonal and personal dynamic of consciousness. And what I mean by that is you have the conscious mind, which is selective. Then you have the subconscious mind, which is non-selective. And that pattern plays out over and over again. It's in that understanding that the field of awareness, and this is something you pick up through experience as you practice mindfulness and awareness in the present moment. Bring yourself back to the here and now and start to observe your thoughts. Well, when you become one with the observer of thought, you're becoming one with the field of infinite possibilities. And in that field, you can start to make these changes to extend love to the situation, to heal that broken relationship or dysfunctional relationship. Not to say that every relationship you have between your inner world and the outer world is dysfunctional. Sometimes, you can have a great relationship with your parents, for example, or your family. And that area, when you look at it, how it's happening in the present moment, it's like it's super functional, and there's a lot of love, and there's a lot of joy, and there's a lot of emotions that feel good, that are aligned to heaven. Well, that's not, that's a functional relationship. That's a solid foundation. That's solid beliefs, solid assumptions manifesting in a way that's obviously a benefit. Whereas, you have other people and you look at their family situation and it's a shit show disaster, borderline police getting involved, borderline abusive, toxic, draining, suffering, all these ego attachments that are just actually perpetuating more and more hell. Well, to start to heal a lot of those kinds of relationships, it starts in healing the understanding within by giving what you want. And a lot of times that first giving is in giving yourself peace or giving yourself love or giving yourself healing. By giving, you're unconsciously saying to the field, I am this. I am one with abundance, for example. And abundance comes in many flavors aside from just fiat currency. Abundance can be abundance of time, abundance of joy, abundance of opportunity, abundance of health. These concepts of abundance are really the antithesis of the mindset of scarcity, which is just another flavor of a mindset of fear. It's just word games at this point, where it's like you can look at fear as being the belief of separation, the fear of ultimate death, your old identity that was separate from everybody and separate from understanding spiritual law and understanding who you are in Christ and all those kinds of things. It's not to guilt and shame your ego. It's actually about giving love to your ego, which then will have a ripple effect into more and more functional dynamics going on in the present. It's like by first loving yourself and not being in a state where you're feeling guilt and wanting to be punished, feeling fear and wanting to keep yourself safe, all of these kinds of insecurities and bullshit that feel in your own being as being draining, feeling like suffering, having a mental story that's not in alignment with truth. Ultimately, even in truth, just like how do you begin to embody it is you start to give it in the same flow every single time, because everything is just one thing. Ultimately, it's ultimately consciousness being externalized into the form through all these different phases of awareness, and all these relationships symbolically represent that dynamic. And so any external dysfunction is a mirror for inner dysfunction, limiting beliefs, assumptions about reality that aren't true, or disempowering, that aren't true of your creator, that are not true of love. All of these things we're actively renewing and building by giving first. So the things that are easier to give, whereas like the obvious desirings that are showing lack, look at any desire as a unconscious plea for more, like hunger, for example. It's like you don't feel the desire to eat unless you have been starving yourself for an extended period of time, and it's like lack, I'm lacking. Look at fear as I'm lacking love, I'm lacking this, I'm lacking that. Look at health as I'm lacking health, I'm lacking this. Relationship, I'm lacking love, I'm lacking correspondence, I'm lacking. Look at it all as the same thing. Take the evil and all these pedestal, like I'm worshiping this ideal as being some super amazing thing, or whatever. You take this shit off the pedestal, for one, realize it's all reflecting your own inner beliefs and assumptions, and the fear and the dysfunction that you're seeing mirrored in another is a example of what's going on within your own consciousness that you might not be able to be aware enough to realize. By noticing ego in another person, a lot of times, when you just realize that ego is always unconscious of itself, so becoming aware of ego in another person, or dysfunction, or fear, or whatever these trigger words, the words are not important. It's the idea behind the word. It's like, with like learning guitar, for example. So some people get so fucking legalistic and just like, well, this is in music theory land, and just like, well, this is a G major, blah blah blah, and then they just go into this whole spiel of whatever that just doesn't. It's like, okay, what are you doing with these intervals, and what are you talking about anymore? You're just like, are you even playing music, or are you just fucking nerding out on something? It's these like, oh, I need to have the specific label in a way that's like ego trick, is these word plays, the legal bullshit, the inversion of language, the convolution, the complication, the bullshit. Again, that's a good glowing example of the old way of thinking, where you need to have it specifically spelled out because that knowledge is going to keep you safe from danger. It's this habitual fear of death that the egoic consciousness is constantly tricking you into survival mode, tricking you from oneness ultimately. It's like I was listening to a video, I can't remember the guy's name off the top of my head, but he was like, he put an excellent video together where it's like, getting to oneness is easy, staying there is where the challenge is. But in that, it's that same together apart part of that kind of waveform that happens in creation, where it's like you're together apart. It's very sexual in a lot of different ways with these energy exchanges, but more importantly, it boils down to how you internally are interpreting things. Because like the idea of scarcity being interchangeable with the word fear, you can be in scarcity when it comes to money, which is not enoughness, but the other side of that pendulum, look at all these fear-related things, is like a soul-sucking, energy-sucking thing. The other side of the fear pendulum when it comes to money is in fear of loss. And so you'll see that dynamic in play with everything, because everything is one thing. So when it comes to your body, you can have a scarcity of health and being so involved in an illness and pain and everything, where that's inundating your consciousness, which is at the same time speaking these beliefs and assumptions and these thoughts into the field of awareness, the infinite field of awareness that has past, present, future all happening now in like a gigantic simulation that will then, reap that planting back to you. It's that correspondence. It's part of natural law, that as within, so without. And so it can actually work in reverse for a lot of people, where they start just spinning down the drain, just amplifying their own fears, because fear feeds off of fear, and the only way to satiate fear is to create more fear. So there's more constricting, more energy sucking, more negativity, more of this bullshit, not understanding that you are actually giving yourself more bullshit by what you're extending in the present moment in consciousness. So you can either extend fear and give fear, and what you give, you get, or you can extend love, and what you get back is love. So, for example, everything being one thing, fear being the lack of, scarcity of, the illusion of, because it's not actually like that. The part of renewing our mind to that new identity in Christ is in realizing that creation is perfectly mirroring these principles. It's perfectly mirroring the suffering to you. It's like, even in what you don't want, it's perfectly happening, even though it's undesirable. But it's like anger is created by your creator ultimately, and the experience of that, even though it's terrible and it sucks and it's like draining and it's like painful, it's beautifully painful, and in the sense that you can appreciate how perfectly these annoying situations just effortlessly came together. And like, even by just appreciating how perfectly fucking like a circus something is, it can start to, then you're giving a different point of view to a situation, which then will reflect back to you. So it's like with money, for example, it's like you can have also fears in acquiring it, like everything is scarce and it's going to be hard and difficult. Well, that's one mindset. The other is, I'm hoarding this because of fear of the future. I might need this. Or, you could also be in fear from just spending it. And part of abundance is it comes and goes. You can use it to bless and then be blessed. So to multiply anything, you first give it. So, if you want to make more money and you don't have money, well, what can you give as far as value goes? It's like, well, I can give my time, effort, and attention to something, which then will, by giving, I'll receive. I can start sharing money, which will then open you up to start to receive more. And it's like, oh, Mike, that's a bold claim. That seems so counterintuitive. Well, it is counterintuitive if you view everything as separate, but when you realize that the source for abundance is this metaphysical principle, and what you give, you receive, you can start doing it with things where you may not have so much resistance. Say if you're locked into like, your money situation is a direct reflection of where you're at in consciousness. No, you don't have a man giving you money. It's all your own consciousness and your relationship with God. And whether that's 50 grand a year or $50 million a year, it all is a result and stemming from the one power. So you can be jealous and envious, which a lot of the world is, of people that are abundant, even though it's their own mind that is the physical demonstration has its roots in consciousness. It's like the garden of your life is planted in awareness and consciousness. the demonstration that you're showing to everybody is just an embodiment of your faith. And either your faith is in scarcity and evil, or it's in the oneness and goodness of God. Either one is a choice, and we're always making a choice either consciously or unconsciously. The more consciously we make choices, the more we can start to apply that to bigger and bigger things without a bunch of resistance and limiting beliefs and blocks and resistance. Because our soul is traveling up the vertical dimension of reality. The ego is traveling across the horizontal, past the present, which is the only time that's real, but to the ego, it's a means to an imaginary future where in the future everything works out and it can feel content and alive and full of all these desirable things. But meanwhile, in the present moment, which is actually where our experience of life is, it's grinding, it's sacrificing, it's tormenting itself, it's feeling guilt, it's going from one thought to the next thought to the next. It's never content, it's never happy, it's never satisfied, it's always just spinning around in this gigantic loop over and over again. Meanwhile, feeding egregores and feeding the undesirable that it doesn't even want. Again, what you give, you receive. So if you're giving scarcity, fear, torment, limitations to yourself, that's what you're going to receive. Is that starting to click yet? It's in first making the choice that you're going to apply these principles. You got to do it. Because you're already doing it. Unfortunately, for the people that are already doing it, it's like you're not learning how to manifest. You're just realizing you've already been doing this, and the shit show that's going on in your life is a direct result of what's going on within. So to fix anything, you have to just let go of all the bullshit, and you'll naturally start to rise. And as you naturally start to rise and experience more love by first extending love to yourself, instead of extending hatred and like guilt and shame and anger and fear. Well, what you give to another, you give to yourself. What you give, you get. It's selfish. It's like, so it's selfish to the big self, and it's like, and you can feel it in your own consciousness as you do this. It's not something that's like, oh, I don't believe it. It's like, test this. It's the only way you'll know. First-hand experience. It's like you don't need a middleman out here to have a spiritual relationship with your creator. You just need to start applying the things that you already know you should be doing. Whereas in the past, you were just letting your mind run wild with scarcity beliefs and fear, just waiting to die and keep yourself safe from that fear, which unfortunately starts to same. It's just all the same shit. It's just thoughts of evil, thoughts of good, thoughts of whatever. It's just a thought. Thoughts of doubt, thoughts of envy. All those will manifest into creation as either a person that will confront you. You will be compelled to experience it regardless. It's not like you won't be. So you just like the more that you give service to others, you get service in return. It's like a lot of times the love that you give, like in a work environment, the love you put into what you're doing comes back in its form as compensation in some form, multiplied and pressed down. It's like as you look at things as investments versus like debits. It's that like a mindset shift. It's like the banking system is a good example, because I was so like triggered by Federal Reserve and how this money just gets created out of nothing. It's already based on faith and everything else. It's not really tangibly real. Well, and it's created up out of nothing, which means you can create it up out of nothing by just understanding natural law and how this shit is already part of an inheritance anyway. So you live in the end, you bring heaven to the present moment, you extend love to yourself, you give in order to receive. And so with like banking, for example, it's like I look at whenever I put money in the bank, I used to have a fear of loss every time I put it in there, of like, oh, it's like they're just going to take this and then write out loans and do this and do that, and then the money's gone. And fear. But now when I do it, I look at it as like I am the creditor. It's like, which is actually legally true anyway, because it's just the way things are. But the world is different than what we thought it was moving into it. We thought it was a certain way. We thought it was this. We thought it was that. And by our thinking, it made it so. And by our thinking, it'll also be revealed to us differently. And it's like through doing this, you see that it's true. It's like, you got something fucked up with your body, you start to give it love in the sense of like, what does it need? Does it need worked? Does it need to be active? Does it need to do this? Does it need to do that? It's like anything, you're experiencing in life is a reflection of a lot of the past things that we planted into awareness and our beliefs and everything else. But, the things that are dysfunctional and obvious weeds in their garden, well, for one, you pluck those thoughts out of mind, but then you start to extend love in place of that. Start to give in order to receive. So it's like, in order to deal with like pain, something I'm very familiar with, spending 2 decades dealing with a fucking hip issues and fucking everything else. It's like you don't battle the quote unquote illness. You don't battle the sensations. You don't battle the pain, any of that. You start to extend healing and love to that area. It's like, it's all just one relationship being externalized in different ways. And there's areas that are like, I have a very functional, healthy, loving relationship with maybe my wife and family. But, when it comes to my body and, some of the things with my business, maybe those are a shit show. It's the shit show areas that need to be addressed in order to renew your mind into extending love to it, realizing that it's not separate from your spouse. It's not separate from your family. It's all part of this mental correspondence that through giving love to it, you will start to see a change. And it's like, Mike, these are bold claims and it's on you to prove it. It's like, no, it's on you to test it for yourself. It's like, I already know this works. I don't really care if you suffer endlessly, can habitually fail at everything that you do, be miserable. I don't really give a fuck. That's your choices and that's on you. But for the people that actually are like, hey, this doesn't cost anything to do, I'm already doing it in a very negative way that's spiraling me and making my present moment very shitty and undesirable. If all I have to do is start to change my thinking, but then you also have to take the actions, because the actions are what cement it and erase the doubts. And until you erase the doubts, they're going to be externalized as a thing that you think is real. It's like, again, with money, abundance, if you aren't spending it and giving it without having a fear that you've lost it or you never get it back, that's not saying the truth of creation is abundant, because God is abundant and God is in all things. And so it's about moving your mind into the truths of God and the biblical promises, being that is just how it is. The creation is abundant. Everything functions according to metaphysical law. There's no getting around this. It just is what it is. And part of that knowledge and experience is through being able to successfully do things. It's like, get out of this idea that habitually failing is somehow noble or whatever, because it's not. It's bullshit. You're doing it to yourself, and there's people that are demonstrating exactly what you're trying to do, and if they can do it, so can you, because it's only one power that manifests it. So the difference is in your thinking. The difference is you, and more likely some limiting belief that's pushing away what you do want because you don't feel worthy of it, or you feel guilty, or you feel shame for whatever reason. All those kinds of things. Give love to those aspects of creation that are a relationship and start extending love to it. Whether that's your body, whether that's your mind, whether that's your family, whether that's your finances, whether that's your just job situation, whether that's your fill in the blank, your pets, everything is one thing being externalized in different forms. And if you're looking at creation in the present moment as being like a shit show, a hell, and you're not experiencing it in levels of more and more realization of the kingdom of God, which is already an ever-present reality, that you start to experience more and more so as your mind gets renewed into connectivity, into oneness, into understanding this correspondence. If again, any of these areas that you're lacking, which is an area that you're spending the present moment desiring, if only I had this, then I'd be so happy. All those things. Just look at that thought of lack or fear. Same thing, same difference. Oh, ego, same word. It doesn't matter. Don't get hung up on the words. Get more involved in the doing, the taking action. You can call it whatever the fuck you want. Makes no difference. But you'll feel that resistance, that drama, that knee-jerk, unconscious limiting belief that will come up in the face of whatever relationship it is, whether that's relationship with the government, paying taxes. Do you have a negative story? Are you extending what you don't want to receive to it? That's the mile marker. You start changing your relationship with everything going on that has a negative story attached to it within your own mind. Give it love and watch how that starts to bloom into the mirror of reality that will impersonally mirror that change back to you as you embody more of the end, which is heaven, which is love and not fear, which is unity, not separation. Anytime you're looking at even a person, maybe it's me, maybe my energy is just really triggering you, and it's like, I want to attack this motherfucker. How dare he say that we're all connected? Fuck him. I'm not connected with him. And then you're just really just amped up and energized and just like, let's fucking, grievance thoughts and attack thoughts and everything else. Well, it's like the things that other people are doing that are super triggering, if that shit didn't exist within you, it wouldn't even be bothering you. So in that moment, you forgive yourself for seeing that aspect, that shadow aspect being mirrored back to you. You forgive yourself and you give love to, ultimately you'd be giving love to yourself because it's you're seeing it mirrored back. But as you give to another, it comes back to you, which does give to yourself. So you extend love to that person, you extend forgiveness, you extend, they were just programmed by some abusive fucking psycho, and this is the best they can do, and they're just not awake to it yet. They got the limitations, they got all this bullshit working against them, they're cursed, obviously. Well, noticing that about another, noticing the unconsciousness, is divine sight in a lot of different ways, because that's showing that that's not who you are choosing to be in the present moment. And as you give to another, it strengthens the abundance within you. Does that make sense? So it's like, if hey, I need $20, and you're like, okay, universe is abundant. This is seed money. I'm going to get $200 in return because it's going to be pressed down, multiplied, and returned. Cursing and blessing does that. It's multiplied and comes back, and you'll be compelled to experience it. Whereas when you realize that it's a blessing to give, that you'll receive, then it's not a big deal. But if it's like, oh, if I give, I lose. If I give, that makes my survival at risk. I could need this if my water heater goes out, or I had to buy food. I don't want to starve to death. These thoughts of death and decay. Don't battle and resist the thoughts either. The same principle. Extend love instead. It's like, I used to think that way. At the time, it seemed to make a whole lot of sense. But, I'm evolving, I'm growing in my consciousness. I'm going to extend love to that scared ego that just wants to live. I'm not going to destroy it. I'm going to give life to it. I'm going to show love to it. And as you give to even your personality and ego, it strengthens the love already inherently in you, so it's more intense. So hopefully that's helpful. Hopefully that's something you can start to tangibly do and try and put to practice. I can guarantee you, as you do, you'll feel lighter. Your energy will be elevated. You'll be able to demonstrate more and more desirable things effortlessly as you realize everything's perfectly happening. That only love is real. And perfect love casts out all fear. So if you're feeling any type of fear whatsoever, that will be let go of eventually as you start to connect with the inner man, the inner woman, the inner being that you are, and actually believe that that's real. The mirror of reality will show you that. But I think I'm about. So, I appreciate you guys liking, sharing, subscribing, and girls. I appreciate your spiritual support and your physical support. Thank you for that. A donation link in the description. I appreciate it. Thank you. And until the next now, God bless.